are recording. Okay. So I put this together last year because I thought it would be really beneficial for parents of 8th grade and even 9th grade students to know a little bit of information about college admissions, because sometimes I have 11th and 12th graders come to me and it's too late. The decisions have been made. The decisions are already kind of baked into their profile, and you can't undo some of the things that they've done. So let's see. I am going to start by saying that the overriding question for your child at this juncture of 8th, 9th, really even 10th grade is, what are they doing today to create a fulfilling high school experience for themselves? Not what are they doing to get into college, but what are they doing to create a fulfilling high school experience for themselves? So I have a small little series of slides to show to help illustrate everything that I want to tell you guys. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Okay, I'm hoping you guys can see this. If you can't, let me know. All right, so okay, so early college planning for 8th and 9th grade students. Here's a little outline of what I'm going to present: the current state of affairs, course planning, extracurriculars and summers, nuts and bolts, well-being, and peace, perhaps the most important thing of all. There's a lot of numbers in college admissions, and I always love this quote: not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. You show me a teenager, I'll show you someone who's gifted and talented. Some teenagers have very quantifiable talents that can be measured and evaluated. Some teenagers have talents that are harder to quantify and aren't maybe quite as tangible. And if you're a student with a lot of tangible things that can be counted, might fare well in the college admissions process. So I love this quote because it just gives important perspective as you proceed and you help your children through this passage. And I will tell you, I have a child out of college, a child in college, and a child going to college. And as much as I know and as much information as I have, it is a very challenging passage to parent. So what I would say to you is that working on creating a fulfilling high school experience now will hopefully create interesting and authentic experiences for your children, and they will have interesting and authentic things to share about in their college applications down the road in a couple of years. You might have an organically high achieving student, and if you do, that's wonderful. When parents try and manufacture an organically a high achieving student, one of the things that can happen is, and what maybe parents don't totally understand at this juncture, is many high achieving students with stellar grades, superlative test scores, just commanding extracurriculars, do not fare well in this process. You can do everything right and still not get admitted to a college. And I don't share that to make you anxious. I share it to say, okay, how are you going to parent your child to let them have a fulfilling experience? Because if a student is always chasing accolades for college admission, they've almost sacrificed their adolescence and then they don't get in. It can be very devastating. So above all, kids should be doing the authentic things that they want to do, and hopefully that will lead to a profile that will help them get into a school that will be a good fit for them. And I'll talk a lot about fit. So you don't really want to raise an 8th, 9th, 10th grader to get into college. What you want to do is help them be students that can be successful when they get to college. Anybody can get into college. Getting into college isn't actually that difficult. going to college and sustaining 8 semesters and coming out with a plan for what to do with the rest of your life, or a plan what to do with the next phase of your life, that's challenging. So I would encourage you, instead of focusing on achievement so much, would be to focus on 3 things: cultivating hard work, building relationships, and solving problems. Really important to let children solve their problems. And I will quote one of the books in the college admissions world is the Fisk Guide, and Ted Fisk wrote this book. He was a New York Times journalist, and in the 70s he started writing about colleges and eventually spun off and has been putting out this guide to colleges. And Ted Fisk said, the American system of higher education is a real treasure. We have so many colleges in this country. And the other thing I would say to you is, what is the best college? Well, the best college for one student might not be the best college for another student. And I would go, it's the same parallel if you said, what is the best car? Well, I don't know. I mean, do you need to carry 6 people? Do you need speed? Do you need fuel efficiency? The best car for me may not be the best car for you. So really to focus on your child and what is the best fit for them. I would find ways that your child is succeeding and laud them. Do not tell them they're doing well in school if they're not. They're going to know that you're not being honest with them. But maybe your child is struggling academically, but maybe they're a really patient sibling, or maybe they're really helpful at home, or maybe they're a really generous friend. And you can find ways to laud your child with that are authentic and that help them feel good and build them up. The other thing I would tell you is, do not find a parent. As your child goes through high school and the college question starts to loom more and more, find an older parent who is not doing this anymore, that has done this. It can be a mentor and someone for you to vent to. Do not engage in these conversations with parents of your children's peers. You will stress them out, or they will stress you out. Just keep this is your family's private business, and do not share information about your children's grades, your children's test scores. This is your private information. So some specifics around what you should know about college admissions right now. What I will say to you is that the bad part of statistics is selectivity is being driven down each year, noticeably so. Town and Country magazine just released an article talking about 5-6 years ago, schools like University of Miami, Tulane, Northeastern, a reasonably strong, and a good student could get into those schools 5-6 years ago. All those schools, their selectivity rates have dropped dramatically. The good news is still more than half of the colleges admit more than half of the students. There's a lot of choices out there. The pandemic has really scrambled the whole college admissions process. And in that, more students are applying to more schools. The Common App had 300,000 extra applications this year. They went from like 1.1 million to like 1.3 million, 350,000. Test optional is a double-edged sword. Test optional means they're going to have to use your essays, your letters of recommendations, your grades more. Test optional has expanded the range of schools that kids are applying to. Maybe you used to have, maybe in the past, if you had a kid with a really high achieving academic profile, but just didn't have the test scores, maybe they would back off some highly selective schools because they just knew their scores weren't going to support their application. And now test optional has made it a little bit of a free-for-all. Colleges are leaning into high schools that they know. So if they're having a hard time figuring out who to accept, and they know kids from a certain high school have come there and been successful, they might lean into those schools. There's a lot of pass, fail, and grade inflation. I am finding, and I think the 2022 cycle was no different, it's a little bit of a Plinko board. It's a little bit of like, how do you know who's going to get in where? It's as challenging as ever. So it is a little bit chaotic, but my goal is to help alleviate some of that stress and help you guide your student with good decisions. For the 24 to 25 kids, the dust will have settled, but the landscape may look different. The parents that might be on this, and I don't know exactly where you are in the process, if you have a rising ninth grader, that's the class of 2026. I don't know what test optional is going to look like in 2026. Is it still going to be there? Is it going to be, I just don't know. So that is some of the current state of affairs. So when you have an eighth grader, and you have probably gone and done a spring meeting with a guidance counselor somewhere at the high school that they're going to attend, and you start course planning, there's a couple of things you really need to keep in mind. You need to have an eighth grader taking, or rising ninth grader taking courses that are going to stretch and challenge them, but not overly stress them. And that means knowing a little bit about your high school, knowing a little bit about your student, and trying to make good decisions around that. The biggest decisions in course planning are around world language and math. So I just want to make sure there's nobody else trying to get in and join us. I don't think there are. Okay. Okay. So world language and math. Two things. If you want to be considered at a selective college, they're going to expect 4 years of a language. They do not expect French 4 in 11th grade. You can't say I did 4 years. They expect you to take the language for 4 years. So if you have a student that's on the fence, maybe they were recommended for French 2, that they think they should take French 1, just keep in mind that they really, to have the most options for college admissions, they really need to have 4 years. So there's nothing wrong with opting for French 1 if you're on the fence, because the French 1 student might be in a better position to try to get 4 years of a world language, as opposed to the student who goes into French 2, really struggles. By French 4, they're like, get me out of this. I cannot possibly face AP or French 5 or IB or whatever French your school might offer. The math curriculum is the other area that starts to kind of open doors and I don't want to say close doors, but shift students' options. You want to have yourself set up so that you have the option to take calculus as a senior. Now, again, colleges expect 4 years of math. So if you are only set up, if you take Algebra 1 as a freshman, that means you're taking geometry as a sophomore, Algebra 2 as a junior, and then pre-calculus as a senior. That curriculum could work because that is 4 years of math. If you're trying to get into calculus as a senior and you do not start geometry as a freshman, you're going to have to probably double up at some point. Most schools will allow you as a sophomore to take geometry and Algebra 2 simultaneously, which allows you to take pre-calculus as a junior, and then you're set up for calculus as a senior. The challenge is I get juniors that come to me that didn't double up as sophomores, and it can be very challenging to find a way. It can be almost impossible to find a way to get on track for calculus. And there are certain courses, not courses, but at certain majors where they're going to expect you to come in with calculus. So if you're a late bloomer in the STEM field and you think you really want to go into something in STEM and you're trying to get into calculus, it pays to have yourself on a trajectory that if you're not taking geometry as a freshman, you are at least doubling up as a sophomore. Your senior year should have in English and math, a world language, a history, and a science. You could forego history and double up on science if you're headed that way, and that's where you see yourself headed, or vice versa. If you're really not into science and you really think you're going to be studying the humanities, you could step back from the science, but pull on a college prep AP level social science of some sort. You need to add rigor each year and do better. A lot of parents talk about GPA, and GPA matters, but it's a combination of not only what is your GPA, what courses did you take? What courses were available to you and what did you challenge yourself? Did you take advantage of the advanced curriculum at your high school? A lot of kids think junior year they're done, but the reality is senior year grades are the last grades colleges see, and they're very important because you're taking the highest level coursework you've done, and they want to see you doing your highest level work. So senior year, first quarters, first trimester, first semester really does matter. And I already said this, GPA is not enough. You have to then look at rigor too. The curriculum, the GPA is like running a mile on a track. You do 4 loops and a coach will track each loop and see how you do. So even if you have a poor start in high school, it is not too late. They will look at your global GPA, but they will also look at what did you get freshman year? How did you do sophomore year? How did you do junior year? They want to see a growing trajectory of you getting stronger academically in harder courses each year. They will forgive a slow start, but if they see you dipping in 11th and 12th grade, they're going to go, boy, is this kid on course to come to our campus and be successful? You want to do better and better and increasingly harder classes. Colleges only see year-end grades. This is important. Parents will call me sometimes and be like, they got a D third semester, third quarter. And I'm like, okay, no one's going to see that D, but they had an A and a B and a D. They got to get this grade on track to be at least a B for the year. They only see your grades. I would really let your freshmen sort their freshman year out. I would try to get them on some campuses to motivate them. Campuses generally tend to be gorgeous, fabulous places with incredible facilities and all you can eat ice cream. And if you get them on a campus, they'll see why they're working hard. They'll have a tangible goal that they're working towards. Hold on a second. Many schools recalculate the GPA. They might take out electives. They might take out physical education. They might put a GPA in their own scale. They might weight things. They might unweight them. So it's just something to be aware of, that whatever GPA your high school is showing your student having, a college might recalculate the whole thing. 9th grade is like a baby pool. Just let them sort it out. I kind of already said that, but you would let your child manage themselves in a little pool, with some supervision. And I think that 9th grade is the same way. Let them start to sort this out. So how do you address summers and extracurriculars? You want to encourage and support your student in clubs and sports, and whatever that might mean, gear, rides, whatever they need. They should be encouraged to encouraged to experiment and try things and see what they like and what they don't like. It is a very good idea to explore clubs and sports outside of school too. Schools usually offer some great stuff, but outside things can create great social networks for kids. If you have a youth group at a religious organization or a club soccer team, those social avenues outside of school can be real lifelines. If the social life at school takes a bad turn, at least you have friends elsewhere and vice versa. So having a network outside of your school social network can be really, really a good thing for an adolescent. Volunteer work is always a great option. I think that volunteer work is fine. I would give your kids room and space to develop. Now, this can be very challenging if they decide to drop activities. If they've been playing soccer for 10 years or dancing for 10 years, and after sophomore year in high school, they're like, I don't think I want to do that anymore. You might have a panic like, oh my gosh, you're never going to go to college if you don't play soccer or, show consistency in your activities. If they really have a pretty big commitment to something that they don't want to do anymore, I would listen to them carefully, and give them the agency to say, I don't want to do this anymore, because you never know. Some of the things that they are really enjoying might cross-pollinate and percolate into something else as they go into 11th and 12th grade. if you're doing things that authentically interest you, you will have interesting, authentic things to write about, and you will have an interesting, authentic college admissions profile. I think that paid work, when people say, what can my child do to distinguish themselves? Get a job. Get a job. Admissions officers are working people. They're on budgets. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic level you are. If your child needs to work to help support your household, or you are, in a high earning household, it's almost more impressive when students and the colleges have this information. When the student fills out the Common App, the colleges have your zip code, the parent's level of education, their professions, so they can see, like, wow, this is a kid in an upscale community with high earning parents. They have a job, and it shows. It's as meaningful for a kid from a high income household as it is for anybody else. So that's how summers and extracurriculars really let your child feel their way along on what they want to do. So it's always good to talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of how this works. People say to me, if we're traveling, should we go see a school? Absolutely. If you find yourself on the West Coast for a wedding and you're near some colleges, sure, you should go see them. But when you start to figure out, like, what school should my child even go look at? There's 5 factors to consider, small, medium, large. And if you get your kid onto a small campus and a large campus, they're going to know what is more, what feels better to them. You've got to figure out, is a rural school feel good? Does a suburban school feel good? Does an urban school feel good? The next thing you got to factor in is a combination of location, region, distance, climate. Kids with seasonal adjustment disorder want sunshine. Families that don't want to layer on the cost of air travel to the cost of going to college might value a distance that they can drive. Some families are just uncomfortable with a certain amount of distance. And I'll tell you what, in the pandemic, a lot of families really shifted, like, wait a minute, we think we want to be a little closer to home. Cost. I'm going to talk a little bit about cost. I'm not going to talk a lot about costs, but I will tell you that you must address this question. If you have a money tree in the backyard and cost is not a concern for you, God bless you. But most families that I come to me are pretty cost sensitive. They're cost aware. Whether they can afford $80,000 a year or not, they really question it. So I will show you a book towards the end of this that could be a great is a great resource. You need to understand the difference between financial aid and merit aid. Do you qualify for financial aid, or are you seeking merit aid because your earnings and your assets are too high? And I will tell you, it does not take a lot you can be a pretty middle-class family and not qualify for financial aid. And the 5th question is academic program. Every academic program is distinct. Every business program is a little bit different from each other. Biology programs. So when you go in to look at a college and say, okay, I figured out what size is good for me. I figured out what location. I figured out rural, suburban, urban. I have a handle on what is affordable for my family. Then you go in and dig into what is this school's academic programs. Can you visit in 8th grade, 9th grade? Absolutely. Colleges are not in session very long. They're in session from the end of August to early December, end of January to early May. If you have a job, other children, and you don't own a helicopter, you are going to have to figure out, how do I get to these schools? Some schools offer Saturday tours, some don't. If you have an athlete that's in season in the spring, you got to figure it out for the fall. It's not that easy to actually physically get on campuses once you layer on the rest of your obligations. Demonstrated interest. This is a really important thing. Even if you do not go, let me back up. Colleges track demonstrated interest. They have very sophisticated algorithms, and these algorithms tell them how often you've engaged with them. And so it's very important if they get a cold application, they're like, boy, this kid never, ever did anything with us. They never did an online tour. They never emailed us. They never did anything. They never opened their emails from us. So it's important to demonstrate interest. If you go on a tour, you've automatically demonstrated interest. Even if you cannot go on a tour, if you go during business hours, you can usually check in with admissions and send your child in, and they could say, I'm Christopher Smith and I'm here, and they'll say, oh, and wonderful. And, you know, they'll have you fill out a little information for them, and they'll give you a little map and kind of get you pointed in the right direction. That's demonstrated interest. When you go and do an online tour on the campus, on the college's website, that's demonstrated interest. If you go to a regional college fair, or somebody from a college visits your high school, and you check in with them, that's demonstrated interest. Important to know that if you go to a college fair in your region, or someone comes to your high school from a college, that is probably the regional representative for your region, and that is probably the person who will read your application. So it's important, you know, comb your hair, put on a clean shirt, smile, and put your hand out and introduce yourself, because they might remember you and think, oh, this kid was really nice. Testing, you know, you want to have a testing plan for junior and senior year. So it's not something that an early college thought process would need to worry about, but you do need to come up with a plan. Letters of recommendation. You are going to need 2 letters of recommendation. It's important that students know in 11th grade that if you have been the class clown in 9th and 10th grade, it is time to sit up, straighten up, fly right, because you need 2 11th grade teachers to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf on why you would be a good candidate for this college. It doesn't have to be a class where you did well. It could be a class where you struggled, but the teacher needs to be able to write about your process. And I think that it doesn't have to be an 11th grade teacher. It's just typically an 11th grade teacher. The other thing that you need to know about, if you're new to this, is there's several different application plans. There's early decision, there's early action, there's rolling, and there's regular decision. Early decision is you can apply to one college and it's binding. The reason people do it is because they have a little bit of an admissions edge if you apply early decision. And it's a controversial thing, but one of the things that happens in early decision, and it's been accelerated in the pandemic, is schools are taking more than half their class early decision. So if you're applying to a school with a freshman class of 700 and they've taken 350 kids early decision, and you're applying in the regular decision round, there's not that many spots left. So something to be aware of. I encourage kids, get your application done over the summer. You need to go in with your work done in the fall of senior year so that you can do your best work, enjoy your senior year, and have a good last year at home. So when you talk about alleviating stress and how does one alleviate stress in this dynamic? The first thing is to really have the financial piece in place. Have the conversation about cost being a factor early and often. A lot of admissions officers that I hear and listen to and talk to communicate with in professional channels say, you know, the national deposit date is May 1st, and we have families calling us on April 29th, and the kids crying, and the parents have just told them, this school is too expensive for us. We're going to have to move in a different direction. And it's important, if you expect if your child gets a merit scholarship somewhere and you expect them to take that, they need to know that. Every color on this spectrum has challenges. There are serious challenges with high achieving students. There are challenges with students that are not doing their best work in the classroom. It doesn't matter where you are. There's pros and cons to each style of student you might have. I had a friend, her son was just extraordinary, and he got an 800 on every test he ever took, every SAT, back when they had subject tests, whether he had studied it or not, he got an 800 on every test he ever took. And she shrugged her shoulders and she said, look, when you have a kid that's smart, you've got a whole nother set of problems. So sometimes you can see somebody like that and say, wow, that's so great. But this mother said, you've got another set of challenges. So again, you want to encourage them to build relationships, solve problems, work hard. These are the building blocks of being successful when you get onto a college campus. Do not feed the beast. Do not talk about your child. Do not talk about this process in idle chit chat. If you're standing on the sidelines at a game or you run into a parent, it isn't going to get anybody anywhere. And your family's choices are very much about your family. It's much like how any family with a teenager decides how the car is going to be used. Does the student have a car? Do they share the parent's car? Are they allowed to drive the car? Do they pay for the gas? Everybody does it differently. And college admissions and college planning is really no different. I said that sleep. One of the most important things your child needs is sleep. As soon as sleep goes off balance, everything falls off the rails. Their physical health, their emotional health, their social health, academics and athletics take a hit. Every high school student that's trying to do well is going to have a couple of late nights and maybe get, have a little sleep deficit here and there. But if you really see your kid up all night, it's just something to be aware of. So this is a picture, and I put this in here because the truth of the matter is you never know if it's going to work. And this is a year ago, my oldest child finishing college, and my youngest child is actually leaving for orientation tomorrow alone. And, I don't know if it's going to work for my youngest child. We took the time. I hope that this child's choice works. But even with all the information I have, I don't know. Maybe it's going to work, maybe it isn't. This is when you know it works. When they're graduating. And I don't know if you can see it, he went to the University of Vermont, he got an incredible education, he had a great social experience, he did a lot of fun extracurriculars, there were challenges, there were good days, there were bad days. But, we look back and think it was great. So I share this with you to say not so much that I guess I share this with you to say that every parent has anxiety and stress around this. And I hope my youngest is off to a good place, but you really don't know until they go and they have the ups and downs, and then they graduate. That's when I knew. I was like, it was great, but there were challenges and good days and bad days. And so I share that with you to say that, to show even somebody with a lot of experience and information really doesn't know until it's done. But I will tell you, I don't know if it will work for my youngest, where she's going, but I have never stressed about my kids getting into anywhere. So if you can maybe believe that I believe that there's tons of colleges and so many hidden gems, and we have just so many, with 4,000 four-year colleges in this country. So there's so many choices. So to not be stressed and to just kind of celebrate and enjoy your child's high school years. I wanted to show you, if you want more information about how to figure out, do you qualify for need-based aid? Do you need to seek merit scholarships? Who has merit scholarships? How can I find those merit scholarships? The most meaningful, a lot of parents will say to me, where can my kid get scholarships? the most meaningful money you will get is from the college themselves. It will not be, some scholarship that from the Elks Club. There's all sorts of little scholarships like that. They tend to be 1 year. They tend to be not huge amounts of money. I mean, any amount of money is wonderful, but they don't tend to be, at $80,000, any amount of money that's going to really change the game for you. So this book is called The Price You Pay for College. It's by Ron Lieber. He writes for the New York Times, and it's a really great book that'll walk you through, where you might fall on the paying for college continuum. The other book that this is even newer is The Debt Trap by Josh Mitchell. He writes for the Wall Street Journal, and it's a history of how the student loan, it's just, you really want to be careful or enter the student loan pool carefully. You want to be very thoughtful before you just start signing for loans, because there's a lot to know about that. And there's two other really good books. If you want to know more about this, Jeff Selingo is another journalist, and he wrote a book called Who Gets In and Why, with a lot of information on how colleges evaluate students. And this book is called Valedictorians at the Gate, and this is by a Dartmouth a woman who was on the Dartmouth admissions committee. So those are really good resources if you have a child entering high school and you want to know a little bit more about college admissions and how all this works. I wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to tell you. I would just say that getting into college is like getting engaged. Anybody can buy a bottle of champagne and a diamond ring and voila, you're engaged. But showing up at a campus and being purposeful about your time there and exploring options, so how you can move on after college, that takes sustained work. And so I would be I'm always much more concerned about a child's development towards being successful in whatever college they go to than getting into college. Selective colleges are selective because they get a lot of applications. It doesn't mean that the education is necessarily better. So those are my thoughts on if you have an 8th and 9th grader, how to proceed. Would anybody like to unmute and ask any questions about anything that I said? I've been talking nonstop and I might have said something that contradicted myself or was confusing. Would anybody like to unmute and ask anything or put something in the chat? No? Okay. All right. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop recording